Check.
All
Check.
right.
Check.
Good morning. Good morning.
All right. Hang on. I just think I sound better coming out of the grid face, but it's going to be something.
Hello, Tech fans, and welcome into episode 154 of the Tech Sideline podcast, originating from TSL's high-tech studios in the Virginia Tech Corporate Research Center. On today's episode, we dedicate the majority of the show to Virginia Tech men's basketball. Does Saturday's upset of number 3 Villanova mean this is a top 25 team and a squad that can make the NCAA tournament? Episode 154 of the Tech Sideline podcast gets started right now. Whether you are watching live or archived on YouTube, listening on Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, Amazon Music, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or on Stitcher, we are so glad that you could join us as we record on Monday morning, November 30th. We have our managing editor, Chris Coleman, with us on the show today, as well as our founder and general manager, Will Stewart, the best podcast producer in the land, Malcolm Stewart, behind the scenes, and I'm your podcast host, Evan Hughes. A reminder, if you are watching on YouTube this morning, if you have a question for Will and Chris, we will get to it at the end of the show. Be sure to put it in the YouTube live chat. And also, if you're watching live on YouTube, please hit the like and subscribe button. This week and every week, the Tech Sideline podcast is presented by the Fisher Law Firm, Virginia's trusted DUI and traffic defense firm, dedicated to defending individuals charged with traffic-related offenses. The Fisher Law Firm handles cases throughout the Commonwealth of Virginia. To date, the firm has defended tens of thousands of people charged with moving violations. For free consultation, call anytime, day or evening, toll free. The number is 1-800-680-7031. Again, that's 1-800-680-7031. Or you can email the Fisher Law Firm at info@fisherlegal.com. Gentlemen, good morning. It's great to be back with you. Will Stewart, how was your Thanksgiving?
It was good. I was so excited because Virginia Tech did not have a game. That is the first time in, I don't know, I didn't even do the research. I don't remember the last time they didn't have a game. I don't think they've had a Thanksgiving weekend off since I started Hokie Central almost 25 years ago. So it was nice to be just hang out, eat dinner, help decorate the house for Christmas, all that stuff. It made me kind of lazy, made me not want to come back.
Chris, how was your Thanksgiving? Because typically I know you're working a lot of those games too, so did you get a chance to kind of kick back and relax?
I did pretty much nothing all weekend. It was great. I didn't realize how tired I was. I
know.
Slept a lot.
Yep.
I'm still tired, but better than now than it was, for sure.
You know, a lot has happened in the last week. Think about it. It's been 7 days since our last podcast. Of course, we didn't have a show on Thursday of last week because it was Thanksgiving. The last show that we had, we were breaking down the 47-14 win for Pittsburgh over Virginia Tech. And now we finally get to dedicate the majority of a show to Virginia Tech men's basketball. And my goodness, what a start for Mike Young's squad. The Hokies are 3-0, coming off of a upset win of number 3 Villanova on Saturday and then knocking off South Florida on Sunday. Will, how impressed have you been with this squad a week into the season?
So I'm glad you asked a general question because to me, and I'm interested in getting Chris's thoughts about this because we haven't really talked about it, they just look completely different to me. And we'll go over some stats later that point out that some things are very different with this team. But just, they've typically moved the ball well on offense, but just the looks they're getting in the paint, the ease with which they are scoring. Somebody pointed out that towards the end of last year, it was throw it around and then have somebody jack up a contested three. Now, we're only 3 games in, and once the film gets out, we'll have to see how ACC coaches deal with Virginia Tech. But 3 games in, it looks like a much smoother operation, and you can see the depth of the lineup and how that's helping, how having post players is helping. And Chris had a comment about the Michigan State win last year versus the Villanova win this year.
Which, I thought last year when Tech beat Michigan State, it was luck to a certain extent. I mean, Nolly just got hot and made some insane shots that he couldn't replicate.
Oh, I remember the three-pointer that he clinched it with. He just threw it in from the ocean.
You didn't feel like Tech beating Villanova was luck. Villanova's a really, really good team, but Tech went toe-to-toe with them. They scored inside. They scored outside. They competed with them very well on the boards. You just felt like Tech belonged in that game, and it wasn't a fluke. That was my takeaway from watching it. I think there's more size, obviously. There's such a variety of players that you can use different lineups depending on the matchup that you're facing. Like USF was a bigger team, right? And they're going to crash the boards. So you're wondering why Pimsl didn't play very much the first 2 games. Well, he wasn't a great matchup against Villanova where they spaced the floor so much. But USF is a bigger team, so you go bigger to combat that and to keep them from crashing the boards and everything like that. Or you can go a little bit smaller with against Villanova because, like I said, they basically run that ISO offense. Basically, is what it is to a certain extent, and you can go a little smaller against them. By having so many scholarship players, you give yourself more lineup options, and even when you're missing a couple of guys with injury, you've still got 9 guys you can put in the game.
I mean, they're doing all this without John Ojiako and Jalen Cone, guys who started a lot of games last year.
So when you have 13 scholarship players, you could have 2 guys hurt and then 1 or 2 guys who aren't quite ready yet, like Darius Maddox and even Gesson to a certain extent, and you still have 9 guys.
Yeah.
Right? So it's just a much, much deeper team. It's a more experienced team. Even though Pimsl has never played in this system, Jada's never played in this system, Mutz has never played in this system, you've still got experienced college basketball players now. And you've got guys like Wabisa Beatty, who has played in a Sweet 16. You've got Jada, who has played in Elite 8 with Kansas State. You've got Aluma, who's made the second round and played against Kentucky in the NCAA tournament at Wofford. I mean, you have experienced basketball players who have played in big games on this team. So, just a much, much better team, much stronger team than last year with more options. Player development has been good, in my opinion. You've seen guys add to their games. So like Hunter Couture now has the ability to do something besides shoot a three-pointer. Right,
which he still does well.
Right, which he still does well. Aluma, I think he attempted 1 3-pointer in his 2 years at Wofford, and this year he's shooting 66.7% from 3-point range.
Yeah, I don't have season stats.
We don't have the individual stats on here, but
well, when you look at Tyrese Radford, 1 of 12 from 3-point range last year, and he's already made 2.
He's already made 2
in I think 4 or 5 attempts.
I think Mutz made 2 3-pointers. At Delaware, and I think he's already made 2 or 3 this year. So you just see guys developing, in my opinion, and that's a good sign. So you got roster depth, you got a lot of different lineup options, and you've got a good, apparently what is a very good player development system at Virginia Tech. So things are looking up for sure.
We're going to break down the Villanova game in just a minute. That's what everybody wants to talk about. But we did not get a chance to preview the team before the season started. So, Will, I want to ask you this question. What were you expecting with this team coming in to year 2 of Mike Young as the head coach of the Hokies?
Wow, that's a darn good question. In order to expect something, I would have had to kind of dedicate some mental energy to it. And with everything that's been going on with football, I will I knew in one sense that having a full lineup would be a good thing. I felt like Keve Aluma would be a good player.
Yeah, I didn't think he'd be this good.
So far,
Yeah.
he's better than I expected. I did not expect to see Tyrese Radford adding the 3-point shot like that. As far as Wabisa Bede goes, he's shooting better, and I've had a couple guys text me and say, he looks better. His percentage is up. I don't know that I see him being a lot different, though. But I really didn't have a whole lot of expectations. But the biggest surprise to me is just how good they look this early for this group of players to be playing together. Now, I thought they looked rough against Radford. So I'm sitting there watching, I'm going, does Radford actually have some talent, or what's going on here? Because Tech really doesn't look all that great. But up in Connecticut in the 2 games over the weekend, I thought Tech looked really good.
Well, they didn't get their 2 preseason exhibition games this year that every team has normally. So Radford, to a certain extent, was an exhibition game. I think they looked a little more gelled offensively at an earlier stage than I would have expected them to, with so many new faces and guys getting used to playing with each other. So that's what I would say. That's probably what surprised me. I didn't really know what to expect, and I said this in the little season preview that I wrote. I thought they were going to be better, but the schedule's tougher too, right? Tech plays a much harder ACC schedule this season than they did a year ago on paper. Now, we don't know what's going to happen on a week-to-week basis with COVID and contact tracing and all that as far as Virginia Tech goes and as far as their opponents go either. No way to know. But my expectation was to be better. I thought this team was going to be a better team this year. I didn't know if it would show up in the win-loss record because the ACC schedule is tougher this year than it was a year ago. And obviously there's not as many games this year as there were a year ago either.
Chris, how different does Mike Young's offense look last year to this year when you have a post player like Aluma that can step out and shoot?
It would be interesting, to ask him. Maybe I'll do this one day this year. What percentage of his offense was installed last year?
It was rough.
It was rough
in retrospect.
Well,
it was
rough. when you're throwing the ball to a 6'5" center, there's so much he wants to do that you just can't do when your center's 6'5".
And
right?
he flat said in one of his post-game comments, he was talking about his post players, and I believe the phrase he used was, "This is the way I like to play."
Mm-hmm.
With multiple guys inside, not multiple guys with size.
And he had 0 guys with size last year.
He had Ojiako
coming off the bench for 10 or 12 minutes a game, and that was it. So I don't know exactly how much was installed last year, but I don't know how much is installed now, but quite a bit more than last year. Mike Young's offense is sort of like think of like an RPO for football, a 3-read RPO or a 3-option RPO, where a quarterback can either hand it off to the tailback, keep it himself, or hit that slanting wide receiver over the middle. So Mike Young's offense is sort of like that in a basketball term. There are multiple options on a play depending on how the defense plays you. And it takes quite a while to learn that and install all of it, all the pieces of that, and then have your players be able to go out there and execute it without thinking. And Tech still isn't there. And how could they be there?
Right.
There's so many guys on this team. Like Jada is in his first year at Tech, experienced college basketball player, but this is a different system.
And you can tell that he's not as comfortable as Bede is.
I think the offense runs better with Bede, whereas Jada is more likely to be able to get his own shot.
Right.
I agree that everything he just doesn't look as comfortable as Bede right now. That doesn't mean he won't look as comfortable in January or February or whenever. So I'd be interested to know exactly what percentage of the offense was installed last year and how that compares to this year. But the Mike Young offense is not easy to learn, not easy at all. So, and even last year, it was new for everybody. Like Wabisa Bede was a very experienced player, right? But he was learning a brand new system. So it's a miracle Tech won 16-16 last year.
Well,
The
I think it just points out, how good of a coach Mike Young is. And so we have a poster on the basketball board, GC Hokie 34, who is a former college basketball assistant coach, and he actually was on the Tech staff for a while. He was not a full-blown assistant, right, Chris?
Right. But he was on Greenberg's staff too for a couple of years, I think.
So he dropped by the board last night, and I think he got excited by what he was seeing, and he put a long post on the board. And something that he said that I've read him say this before. So I was looking at the roster and trying to get more familiar with the roster because, again, I haven't wrapped my head around it yet. And I'm looking and I'm thinking, oh, Beatty's already graduated. Jada's already graduated. Or is this the last year for both of them? What's Tech going to do at point guard next year? So I'm like, oh, man. And then I'm telling myself, hey, just live in the moment. And then GC Hokie 34 reminds us of something that he has said before. The Mike Young offense isn't really point guard dependent. The way they move the ball and the way they run the offense, I think GC Hokie's 34 phrasing is everybody's a point guard.
Yeah, and I think the way I've described it before is the system itself is the point guard.
Yeah. So, they'll come across the court and throw the ball immediately. It's not like the point guard's going to hog the ball like he does in some, more conventional, I would say. And particularly by the end of last year, teams had figured Tech out. They knew Tech just wasn't good in the post. And, Nolly started to struggle down the stretch, and Tech just got really easy to defend. And again, we'll dig into some stats, but just Tech just looks so much more fluid on offense, and they're getting more good shots.
So we are 1 week into the season, and I would have asked this question if we had done a basketball preview podcast. So I'm going to ask it right now before we get into talking about the Villanova game, the USF game. Will Stewart, 1 week into the season, is this an NCAA tournament team, yes or no? If you had to predict right now on November 30th, what say you?
I am gun shy because they looked so good at the beginning of last year. And at one point, I think they were 14-5 and 5-3 in the ACC. And even at that point, they'd absorbed a couple of blowout losses.
Well, after they beat Michigan State last year, they had 2 more games left in Maui and got trounced in both.
That's right, BYU and
Dayton. Obi Toppin.
Turns out that guy for Dayton was pretty good.
They
were going to be a number 1 seed if the NCAA tournament happened.
But those 2 games they sort of reinforced the fact that the Michigan State game was kind of luck involved. Yeah.
So let's get back on track. What was the question? Are they an NCAA tournament team? Man, this is such a crazy year. If it was a normal year, I would say they have a shot. And one of the things that bothers me is I think this team, really any team, could really benefit from a full Castle Coliseum and a good atmosphere, because they've done the same thing they did last year. They've had a big win early in the year. The fan base is noticing and is behind them. And I just think that if they could play in Castle and play in front of the Castle Guard and all the fans, that would give them the juice they need at home. Mm-hmm. And I don't know, and we don't know how many games are going to be. We don't even know if the NCAA tournament is going to happen. Now, what a disaster that would be for the NCAA.
Well, what's going to happen? I was actually thinking about this yesterday. They're going to have it in Indianapolis, right? Aren't they talking about it?
Take everybody.
68 teams or however many are in the tournament and bring them all to Indianapolis. Well, okay, so what if you have dudes start testing positive and then you have to shut down a program? Do they have to forfeit their game? Because you can't wait a week to play a first-round game, right?
Yeah, so it's
So I think once you get to the NCAA tournament, if you can't play, you're done. You wrap it up and you go home, right?
I'm just gonna pump the brakes and say I can see it. I can see how it would happen. But remember, as we just talked about a minute ago, this team is as better as they look, is still learning this offense. And as ACC coaches watch film, they'll pick out the weaknesses. And they'll be like, this guy's not good with this part of the offense. When he gets the ball, do this.
Let's say the NCAA tournament happens and Virginia Tech's able to play their full schedule and there is a tournament. Chris Coleman, I know it's early. I know it's a weekend. But what say you? Is this a team that can make the NCAA tournament?
I certainly think they have the opportunity. And Will's right. ACC coaches are really good. I mean, even the worst ACC coaches or good overall coaches,
Yeah.
right? Brian Gregory last night at USF was a bad ACC coach, but
And he's a bad coach at USF too, and I have more to say about
well,
that.
no.
later.
Here's the thing: he's 4th in USF history in wins.
I saw that graphic, but he only has like 50 wins.
Exactly.
I thought that was almost a typo.
Where's Seth in there? Any idea?
Probably first. I
Seth
don't
is
know.
probably way up there.
Yeah, but anyway, so this is a league of good coaches, and they are
For the most part.
they will find spots. They'll find weaknesses and everything. When they found weaknesses last year, Mike Young had nothing to counter with because he didn't have enough players, he didn't have enough experience, he didn't have enough size, just didn't have as many lineup options. And he'll be able to counter pretty much anything. He'll be able to counter the counters better this year because he's just got so many more lineup options. And like I said, man, this team has 3 upperclassmen with major NCAA tournament experience.
Solid point.
And so I think there's a strong chance that they are. I don't know what gets you into the NCAA tournament this year, though.
That's a good point. We have no idea.
I have no idea. I mean,
so don't sweat strength of schedule because that's just not really a thing anymore. And once they're in ACC play, that'll take care of itself.
that'll take care of itself. There's no RPI
Those
anymore,
quadrant
thank
wins,
God.
right? That's
Exactly.
the,
That's a quadrant 1 win.
And there's not a lot of cupcake home games to dilute your strength of schedule.
Right. So it's I don't know what gets you into the NCAA tournament. I don't know what guidelines we're operating under in this season. So I don't know. I do think they'll have an opportunity to be there. There'll be ups and downs like every basketball season, peaks and valleys. But I think this year there won't be as many valleys as there were last year.
well, if Virginia Tech were to make the NCAA tournament this year, it would be 4 consecutive trips to the NCAA tournament.
That's
and
true.
I did
That is
get confirmation from Damian Souse on that the NCAA has come out and said that there's no 2020 NCAA tournament. So if you were going to make it, you can't say that you did.
Mm-hmm.
So that if Virginia Tech were to make it, that would be 4 in a row. So anyways, found that as an interesting stat. Okay, let's transition and talk about the headliner. We're going to talk about this overtime win over number 3 Villanova for Virginia Tech on Saturday night. 81-73 the final. Watford transfer Keve Aluma dropped a career high 22 points in the win. Chris, what impressed you most about what was a resilient come-from-behind win for the Hokies?
Well, the resiliency. That's a good
resiliency,
word. Yeah.
52-40, and I'm thinking, well, here comes Villanova.
Right. Tech got off to a good start in that game.
Yeah.
And they were hanging right there with them. And then Villanova goes on that run to go up by, was it by 12?
It was 52-40.
Okay. And you're like, well, that was a good effort. But, Villanova's, they're a really, really good team. So Tech was able to hang in there then. And
I think they scored 8 in a row to make it 52-48.
that sounds about right. And they put a run on them. And, they just took over the game down the stretch. And then even when that controversial call happened right before the end of regulation, your Tech players, that game was over. Tech had won, right? And then all of a sudden Villanova's at the free throw line, tying the game to send it into overtime. That can be
demoralizing.
Demoralizing, deflating.
Lots of D words.
Lots of words like that. But Tech they came out in overtime and hit Villanova in the mouth. They threw the first punch. Some of that is due to, that was Villanova's 3rd game in 4 days.
Right.
Villanova's very, very good, but they got a couple of guys that don't really come off the floor very much. And, they were probably worn down to a certain extent.
And just like last year, I didn't think Michigan State played well last year. Gillespie played really well for Villanova, and really their other stars did not step up.
Right. The first half in particular, Gillespie was awesome, and everybody else did nothing. Gillespie's one who basically plays almost 40 minutes a game for him. So when he was missing those free throws in the second half,
that's right,
and that was his 3rd game in 4 days, and he hardly ever comes off the court. So I think that had a little bit something to do with it, but yeah, I think Tech's resolve and the fact that they, whenever it seemed like things weren't going to end well for them, they found a way to fight back. That was the biggest thing that stood out.
Yeah, so you get down 52-40, and you come back from that, and then you have that stuff happen at the end of regulation, and you bounce back from that. And really, it was 17-9 in overtime.
This has actually been a feature of Tech basketball for two tenures in a row now. Buzz's teams on a number of occasions found themselves down by a number of points and would come back and things like that. And now Mike Young's teams are doing it. And what's the one constant? I'm gonna sabotage the show.
Please
here
do.
To talk about something I thought about all weekend. What's the one constant on both of those teams? The latter Buzz Williams era and the early.
Well, all I can think is Wabisa Beatty.
Exactly. Wabisa Beatty takes so much crap from this fan base because he's not an advanced offensive player, and he's not. But the most important thing Mike Young did when he got here was retain Wabisa Beatty.
Because remember, he was in the transfer portal.
He was in the transfer portal.
Yeah.
Not Landers Nolly, who was the more talented player, but Landers Nolly is wants to do what's best for Landers Nolly, not necessarily the team. Tech has to win in basketball and football in a certain way with buy-in, right? And all you have to do is look at Wabisa Beatty. You can look at that dude and tell he's bought in, right? That dude works his tail off. And we've talked all this year about how there's a leadership void in that football program over there. And there is not in the basketball program. And young players follow the older players. And the older players set examples for the younger players. And I think that's been a big issue with football. And one of the reasons we've been able to stay successful under Mike Young so far is because there's complete buy-in over there because people listen to Beatty. I've seen that dude in Kroger, man. When he walks into Kroger with his teammates, he's always the first guy through the doors, and everybody else is behind him. He is the most important player in this program, and you can't look at a box score and see that, and you can't even necessarily see it on television, but I think what's happened to the football team this year and some of the issues they're having and the lack of buy-in and the leadership void and everything like that.
When they get to Kroger, nobody's the leader.
Right. Actually, for a few of them, I think they need to go to Kroger a little bit more and add some weight. But anyway, Beatty's to me, the unsung hero because everybody looks at a box score. But I think what has happened to the football team this year should really reinforce with all of us how important leadership is and how important buy-in is. And Wabisa Beatty is a big part of that at Virginia Tech. I mean, just made a tremendous difference in this program.
Well, if you remember last year, my criticism of Beatty, if you want to call it criticism, wasn't that his offensive game was limited. I said repeatedly that he needed to have more confidence in his offensive game. Go to the hole and finish, and we haven't really had a chance to see that this year because that's not really, in my opinion, required of him. They've got Jada who can get to the rim, and the offense is just running so much better. Tyrese Radford. I mean, Tyrese Radford against. Let's jump to USF. We can come back to Villanova. Last night, Tyrese Radford is 4 of 4 in the first half against USF, and he came out in the second half like a man on a mission. So I'm going to the hole, try to stop me. So. That's great, and that gets into a stat I did want to highlight, and that is last year free throws made per game 9.5. I mean, everybody knew Tech couldn't drive to the hole, and so far this year in 3 games it's 14 free throws made per game. There's nothing on here about free throws attempted 55 in 3 games. That is 18. Last year 429 in 33 to 35 games. They're barely taking over 10 a game. And this year they're closer to 18. So one of their things going into this year was rebound the ball better and get to the rim more offensively and draw more fouls. And that's something they're doing better. We got to let more games accumulate and see how it goes again in ACC play, but that's a promising early sign.
We're going to talk more about individual players a little bit later. I want to talk about some of the transfers that have come in. I want to talk more about Wabisa Beatty and as well as Tyrese Radford, who led the team in scoring in the win over South Florida. I want to go back to the Villanova game quickly, though, because that play at the end of regulation, we talked about it. The charge that was taken, Villanova, the 2 free throws, sends it in overtime. You come all the way back in the second half to tie it, take the lead, and then have that happen. I mean, just a gut punch.
They said, so was this the one where they would set Kevin Illuma out there and said, miss the free throw?
And he actually banked it in.
And the color announcer on ESPNU, I think, is warning everybody, it is harder to miss than you would think.
Yeah.
And sure enough, how many times have you seen guys bank in free throws when they're trying to miss?
You're trying to throw it right at the front of the rim, and if you get it a little bit high,
boom,
if
it
it's
goes
dead
in.
on, it banks in. Can you imagine if the reasoning that we had lost to Villanova was because of a missed free throw?
Well, mean a made free throw?
Or excuse me, a made free throw. Right.
Yeah.
Can you imagine making a free throw costs you a game against Villanova? That would be one crazy.
The color guy, I think it was the same color guy both
John
nights.
Crispin.
Yeah. I listened to Laser and Burnup because they were doing their live thing on Facebook, and I sort of synced it up with my television for most of the Villanova game. But people on the boards were complaining about the announcers being pro Villanova. I don't know what people expect. I don't know what they're looking for.
I thought they were actually excellent. I thought they were right down the middle.
But fans are like that. But I tell you, by the end of the USF game, he was singing Virginia Tech's praises.
Oh, yeah.
And he also, we'll get to the USF game later. Sorry.
No, well, we can transition to it. My point I just wanted to take away from the Virginia Tech-Villanova game was just this team has not played together long. You've got a bunch of new players on this team, and you're able to come back and rally against the number 3 team in the country that's won multiple national titles over the last decade, and then have that happen and outscore them 17-9 in the overtime period with Wabi Sabiti fouling out.
Right.
I mean, to me, that feels like a signature moment for this team early in the year that they can go back and rely on.
To me, it's a signature moment for the program. It's one thing to beat Michigan State when you have a hot shooting day. Their star point guard's brother had just gotten killed. Yeah. Tom Izzo is Mr. March. He's not Mr. November.
Yeah,
right?
they're known for losing early in the year.
Yeah, so that's one thing. I think pound for pound, Villanova is the best basketball program in the country, in my opinion. And so when you can beat them, and you actually go head to head with them, play for play.
Weren't they there in Pittsburgh when Tech was there? And didn't they play Radford? I watched them. Now it's Radford. It's their first NCAA tournament in a while. Mm-hmm. But I watched them stomp Radford, and I was just like, "Holy cow, this team is good."
The Radford players on their way off the court. I was down in the front row, and I was in the tunnel when they came off the court after the game, and the Radford players were all laughing and smiling. It was like,
yeah, we never had a chance.
We were playing Villanova, just happy to be here.
So that reminds me of, I went to see when Tech was in the Big East from like 99 through 2003, and Ricky Stokes was coaching. I went to see Notre Dame play Tech, and Mike Bray was coaching Notre Dame at the time. He's been there a long time. And I remember a play where, of course, Notre Dame stomped them. But I remember a play where Notre Dame came down with a defensive rebound and got a layup at the other end, and the ball never touched the floor.
Yeah.
And that's the mark of a well-coached team, is when they can move the ball 90 feet and it doesn't touch the floor.
The big thing that stood out to me in Villanova was actually at the end of the game. When they get 2.4 seconds left, it's over. Jay Wright calls a timeout. And Buzz Williams used to do stuff like this, and that's why he was a great
Make
coach
opposing
too.
fans mad.
Exactly. But he called a timeout. It was a teaching moment with a couple of his players. They had no chance to win. They were down by 7 points, and they knew they had no chance to win. And his players go back out on the floor, and they're clapping, right? Yeah. And that's the mark of a great program, when you don't waste any moments that you have to get better and things like that.
Well, at this point, they're totally comfortable with who they are.
Yeah, exactly.
Championships
right, and that's why I say pound for pound, I think they're the best basketball program in the country. And here's your trivia: Virginia Tech is now, I believe, 2-9 all time against Villanova. Mike Young has one of those wins. Which Virginia Tech coach has the other?
I believe Ricky Stokes.
I believe you are correct.
I think they whipped Villanova.
They hammered them. I remember Carlos Dixon had been out with a foot injury. Probably a fifth metatarsal, of course, right? And he comes back for that game, and I think he only scored 3 points, but it gave Tech a boost, and they hammered Villanova. I think that was like a senior day or something in Castle.
And Villanova was ranked, too, if I remember correctly.
Yeah. And it was one of those special days where the coaches were wearing like a certain kind of shoes for, I don't know what that game
cancer.
every year where they, yeah, exactly. Maybe that was it. Maybe I forget. But so Jay Wright's out there in his suit, but he's wearing like tennis shoes. And I had like second row seats for it, so I remember the game vividly. But yeah, Tech hammered them. And Ricky Stokes' team had a habit of, well, they were always bad, but that they'd go out and hammer UConn or hammer Villanova or hammer UVA, and you were like, "Oh, where's this? Where's this?" I mean, we've got the talent. We're just not a good team.
Ricky at some point had a lot of talent.
Actually, the last time we put a basketball team on the court that looked like this, that looked like the one we have right now, was under Ricky Stokes, where we actually had 13 scholarship players, 4 or 5 guys that could actually play in the post. Yeah, that was the last time we had a basketball team that looked like this, but Ricky just didn't know what to do with it. He just
couldn't run a program.
Yeah.
Well, Jay Wright certainly sung Coach Mike Young's praises after the game, and I don't want to allude to that. You mentioned how great of a program they are. You think they may be the best in the country. Jay Wright's won 2 national championships at Villanova. You pointed this out on Tech Sideline Twitter. Jay Wright tweeted after the game, "Congrats to @Coach MK Young and @Hokie's MBB. A tough and intelligent team. We tip our caps," close quote. And then was singing their praises in the Philly Inquirer. So I just think about this game, by the way, which was scheduled less than 48 hours before it was played. This was not originally on schedule. And just the respect that both coaches had, I just thought that was a really unique moment. You don't see a lot of head coaches going on Twitter and congratulating the other team for being intelligent.
Oh, right, exactly. And the crazy thing is, have we even talked about this yet, that this game was not originally supposed to be played?
That's right.
Tech was supposed to play Temple on Saturday. And they find out at 1:45 in the morning is when they come to the agreement to play Villanova.
1:45 in the morning on Saturday?
Friday, I think.
Friday.
Thanksgiving night / Friday morning.
Okay, right.
I think is what it was. So they basically had a day to prepare. So it was like an NCAA tournament game from that standpoint.
So here's a couple of things I tweeted out that, in case you're not on Twitter, in case you missed them. So Villanova led 52-40 with 8:48 left in regulation and seemed to be in control. So Tech, that 8:48 plus 5 minutes of overtime outscored Villanova 41-21 down the stretch. And so let's play. This will be a fun reminiscing moment to sidetrack things here. So the stat was that in their last 6 games against top 3 teams, Virginia Tech is 4-2. Mm-hmm. Not top 5 teams, not top 10 teams, but top 3 teams. Virginia Tech is 4-2.
Michigan State was number 3.
So I looked them up and I put them in order. And this started when Virginia Tech went to UVA in the 2017-2018 season. February of 2018, that was the night that UVA was number 2 and number 1 had lost, and all UVA had to do was beat Tech, and Tech lost to number 3 UVA 64-58. I don't remember anything about that game.
What year was it?
February 2019.
Oh, that was when J.R. Robb was hurt.
Okay, there you go.
Yeah.
And then 8 days later, Tech played against number 3 Duke, and that was when Zion was out.
Yeah, the Zion cam was on him, and Justin Robinson was also out, but nobody talked about Justin Robinson being out.
And Tech won 77-72. That's right. So the next one was about a month later. Of course, Tech played number 1 Duke in the Sweet 16 and lost 75-73 when Med Hill short-armed, he alligator-armed that last shot. And then, of course, the last 2 games and wins are number 3 Michigan State last year, 71-66, and number 3 Villanova this year, 81-73. So one of my projects at some point is Seth. I remember this stat. Seth Greenberg was 3-3 against number 1 teams at Tech, and it should have been 4-2, except Sean Dockery made that long shot.
That's right.
And if you look through Tech basketball history, they have this remarkable history of playing well against highly ranked teams. I don't pay enough attention to other college basketball teams, but you got to figure big college basketball fans, when they see that go across the bottom these days, are like, man, Virginia Tech did it again. So just wanted to kind of go over those games because that stat came out, but nobody put it together and said, here they are.
So after beating number 3 Villanova, you're playing in less than 24 hours against South Florida, and many thought maybe this could be a trap game. You're playing on back-to-back days, don't know what could quite happen, and certainly that did not happen. 76-58, the final. I don't want to spend too much time here, but I want to talk about Tyrese Radford. You brought him up, Will. Chris led the team in scoring with 21 points. Keve Aluma with 12 points. And then Cordell Pemsel really kind of made a name for himself with 10 points off the bench and 6 rebounds.
He's going to be a matchup guy. He's going to play more in some games depending on the matchups. Like he'll play a lot against Florida State, for example, right? He comes from the Big Ten, which is a very, very physical league. And Mike Young alluded to this after the game. He said, with as big as South Florida is, you like a big guy with Big Ten experience, and to just come in and who can bang with those dudes on the inside. And Pimsle's able to do that. He's got some toughness to him. He's got some grit, so to speak. I'll say.
I'm not wearing my grit face mask.
Yeah, but yeah, he's gonna be one of those players. You don't want to play him a lot against Villanova, which is gonna run a 4-out ISO offense and put defensive players in space, right? Well, USF doesn't do that, so you can play him more. Don't expect fireworks from him every night because he's not going to get a large number of minutes every night. It's going to be matchup dependent. But yes, for his role on this team, he plays it very well for sure.
So I was thinking a thought I had, and it relates to big men. Do you remember the Kerry Blackshear foul watch? How every game was just fraught with anxiety over how many fouls Kerry Blackshear had.
What point was he going to pick up a second foul?
And you went in a panic mode if it was his second foul with 10 minutes to go.
Oh
into the
my
first
gosh,
half.
yeah, because his backup was 6'5".
And now I'm not saying I'm going to worry about Kevin Iluma being on the floor or not being on the floor, but it's not a damn disaster
Exactly.
if one of Tech's big men has a little foul trouble and has to sit down. And so the unknown here is, how has Ojiako developed, in Mike Young's system? Do we know anything about Ojiako's injury that's keeping him out?
I think Mike Young said it was a hamstring. I think Jake wrote in the recap last night that it was knee, but I thought Mike Young had said earlier that it was hamstring, so I kind of took the knee part out and just put injury.
Well, so no
but
big
I don't
hurt.
think it's a big injury or anything.
And by